there's inevitably going to be some overlap of what the Floyds Fork DRO controls as opposed to what this new potential conservation farm district would control. So we thought it would be good. There's going to be a lot of people that are interested in both of these processes. So we thought it would be really beneficial to get out in front for a little bit tonight, give a quick overview of the DRO and sort of that process. It'll be running subsequently along with the conservation farm district process. We'll be very sure to make sure that the two inform each other and that the ideas that come out are put in the appropriate category for these. Following the DRO presentation, we'll take a quick little break. And then from there, around 6 o'clock, we're going to get the conservation farm working group together. There are a specific group of people that asked to be on this working group. There were others that asked to be on the working group, and we appreciate your interest. And we hope you're all here to listen. But what's going to happen at 6 o'clock when we get ready to start the conservation farm district, we'll move those folks that were on the working group in as panelists, and then they will have the ability to chime in for some of the conversation. And then hopefully then we'll be able to open it up to everyone for a conversation. So with that, I will go ahead and stop talking. And Chris, I'll turn it over to you and let you talk about the Floyds Fork Development Review overall.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Let me share this presentation with everyone. I hope everybody can see that and hear me.
Chris, I can hear you, but you might talk a little bit louder. It's a little bit faint.
Okay, all right, thank you. So I want to talk a little bit today about the Floyds Fork Development Review Overlay. This is going to be our virtual kickoff meeting for this review project. So the overlay boundary, we should have maps here of the overlay boundary and the zoning layers that are within the boundary. The Floyds Fork DRO or Development Review Overlay basically runs on either side of Floyds Fork. It runs from the Jefferson County line at the south with Bullitt County up through and past 64 to the north up to the Shelby County and Oldham County lines intersection with the Jefferson County line. This area has a mix of zoning, but predominantly for the area south of 64, it's predominantly zoned rural residential. And for the area north of 64, it's predominantly zoned R4. Just a few facts about the Floyds Fork DRO. The DRO is approximately 20.42 square miles, which is actually larger than the city of Frankfort. The DRO includes approximately 2,483 properties. The DRO area also includes 8,911 acres of property that is zoned RR, and that was downzoned to RR as part of the development of the overlay and its eventual rezoning and placement on as an overlay to the zoning layer. That RR zone makes up about 68% of the overall overlay area. In terms of the number of DRO cases that the overlay has reviewed, we looked at from 2007 to September of 2022, there have been 95 cases. Almost 70 of those 95 cases were basically single lot residential development, whether it's a new house, an addition, or an accessory structure. The next two slides are going to talk about the history of Floyds Fork DRO. So the planning for the Floyds Fork DRO began with the adoption of the 1979 Comprehensive Plan. In 1980, as part of the implementation of that comprehensive plan, there was a study called the Environmental and Essential Services Constraints Study. That study did recommend rezoning Floyds Fork to allow only very low intensity uses. That study led to the 1981 Floyds Fork Management Plan, and this study also recommended numerous measures to protect the environment and preserve scenic resources of the Floyds Fork corridor. In 1985, a major rezoning was proposed based on these preceding studies. However, substantial opposition led to the ultimate deferral of this rezoning case. The Snyder-Freer corridor study adopted in 1988 also mentioned Floyds Fork as a resource to be protected. And in May of 1991, a planning process for Floyds Fork began, which ultimately led to a task force of volunteers being appointed and worked on a plan for this area. This plan culminated in the following actions: a rezone of a large portion of the study area to the rural residential zoning district, creation of development review overlay guidelines, and subsequently a rezone to add this DRO to the study area. This ordinance was approved on March 9th, 1993. So if you were to look in the current regulations of the LDC Chapter 3, which relates to the Floydsburg DRO, and also into the rezone ordinance that happened in 1993, you'll see several things as the purpose of the Floydsburg DRO. One is to protect the natural environment. Second is to promote compatible development of land and structures. And the third was to protect property owners and public from several things, such as blighting influences, unsafe buildings, destruction of prominent hillsides and valleys, significant damage to economic value of existing properties, protection from soil erosion and stream siltation, destruction of mature or valuable trees or vegetation and wildlife habitat, as well as a loss of high quality visual character. One discussion that we wanted to make, because there's been some confusion about this, because we do have the Floydsburg DRO is a zoning overlay. So that's quite a bit different than the design overlays, which are part of the Louisville Metro Code of Ordinances. So a zoning overlay, such as Floydsburg, is a part of the zoning regulations. It is subject to the same limitations as other zoning districts. Overlays exist over existing zoning districts for a more specific area, typically are more restrictive than the underlying zoning, are usually written as a standard and not a guideline. However, the current DRO is written more like a guideline, primarily because at the time there was a concerted effort to provide more flexibility in those design standards. Also, zoning overlays do not include a specific committee for the overlay. They're typically part of the zoning review process. And they're also limited by KRS 100, which is the zoning for state law, the zoning chapter. Design overlays are not part of the zoning regulations. They focus more on design, such as building design and some site design. They do not regulate use and intensity, uses design guidelines to regulate development activity, and does include an overlay committee to review any development activity against design guidelines. And these design overlays are also limited by state law, but not by KRS 100. So we did receive Metro Council resolution, as Mike mentioned earlier in the beginning of the introduction to this meeting. This resolution was adopted by Metro Council on June 9th, 2022. And the purpose of the resolution was to have the Planning Commission and Planning Design Services staff analyze and revise the Floydsburg DRO in its current state to eliminate redundancies, provide clear standards, reflect current needs and conditions. It did not include anything to look at expanding the DRO or promoting or talking about rezonings further. It's strictly these three things: eliminate redundancies, provide clear standards, reflect current needs and current conditions. It also said in this review to engage stakeholders and also consider a development review overlay committee. And our next steps. So currently we have completed the review of history and some background information. We're currently in the process of reviewing the overlay guidelines against the current land development code standards and for any overlap and looking at potential redundancies. We're also going to be doing a review of best practices, looking at other communities with similar types of zoning overlays. After that, our step will be to develop options and then bring those options to the public for review and to take comments on those. Based on those comments, we will develop a text amendment proposal, and then we will bring that proposal into a public review to take comments. And then after that, we'll make any additional changes, and we'll begin the text amendment review process, which typically starts with us putting the proposal out for a 30-day review, and then going through the approval process with the Planning Committee, the Planning Commission, and ultimately Metro Council. So there's some contact information. We did create a web page for the Floydsburg DRO review. It's located at louisvilleky.gov. If you go to the Planning and Design Services page, you will find that it'll be under Floydsburg DRO. But this is the specific link here on this slide. In addition, if you have any questions about the process, or like to learn more about the Floydsburg DRO, you can contact me, Chris French, with Planning and Design Services. My email is christopher.french@louisvilleky.gov and also at 502-574-5256. So Mike, I'll turn it back over to you. I know we may have some questions, so thank you.
All right, if anybody has a question, you can put in the Q&A there on the right-hand side of the screen. If not, like I said, we're planning to start the Conservation Forum District meeting or the working group meeting at 6 o'clock. So it's finished in record time, which is impressive. Thanks, Chris. So we've got a little bit of time in between then. We'll start moving folks in that are going to be the panelists for the Community Forum Working Group. I'm sorry, Conservation Forum Working Group. And we'll do that. And then right at 6 o'clock, we'll get started. There's no need to log out. It'll be on this exact same platform we're on right now. So don't log out and look for a separate link. Just stay online and we'll get started in about 15 minutes. Chris, I do see one question on there about the timeline for completing the DRO. Do you want to address that?
Yes, so currently we do not have a timeline. We're trying to work through the staff's review process. And once that is completed, we have to develop options to bring forward to a public meeting. I can't say right now exactly when that would be completed. But we are working diligently to get our review completed and then begin working on those potential options for changes to the DRO. And once we have those developed, we will be going out to the public for a public review and a public meeting. This would be an in-person public meeting as well, just to point that out too.
All right, thanks, Chris. Let's see, any other questions? Let's see. Teresa Bachman, will you please send the meeting slides to us? Chris, can we post those online somewhere?
We're going to post those on the web page for the DRO that I mentioned on my last slide.
All right, and then Lucas Fraser asks, if an overlay district doesn't normally include a committee, why do other overlay districts and then have committees?
Well, so I would just say, as I pointed out in my presentation, design overlays have committees because that is established in state law that they have to have a committee. Those are not established through KRS 100, which is the zoning enabling legislation for communities within the state of Kentucky. So that's it. So the design overlays are completely different. So if you're thinking of Bardstown Road overlay, the downtown overlay, the Lulu overlay, or the waterfront overlay, those are not part of the zoning code and are not regulated through KRS 100. They have a separate state enabling legislation for them. And as part of that, they are required to have their own review committee.
Awesome, thanks, Chris. And thanks, Chris. And then Lori asked, can you email the presentation slides for both meetings to the attendees? Yeah, we can send this presentation out afterwards. There's also a poll that we posted online that I'm encouraging folks to take. Mike Farmer, who are current stakeholders? Mike, I'm guessing you're asking who are sort of the working group members. We've got a list in the presentation that I'll go through that as opposed to just reading this off right now in case anybody stepped away so everyone can see that. Lucas Fraser asks, is this being recorded? Yes, we are recording this and it'll be posted online. Looks like Harold may have hit enter too early, but it says, it is my understanding that the Metro Council. Dramatic. There we go. Never mind, I need to scroll down. Resolution requested recommendations by 12/31/22. Chris, do you want to speak to that?
So my understanding is we have contacted Metro Council and let them know that we were going to end up going past that deadline, so they understand that we're going past that that deadline based on the workload that we have and the other resolutions that we currently have that precede this one.
Terrell Holder asks, is current state of the watersheds ecosystem to be evaluated?
That is not part of the resolution approved by Metro Council. They strictly asked us to look at the specific DRO guidelines. They did not provide anything that would give us any direction to look at the stream itself. So we're just looking at the DRO guidelines themselves based on the resolutions, basically what they directed us to do.
Lori asked, what is the website where you post the Conservation Form District meeting slides and reporting? I'm unable to attend that meeting. Lori, it'll be easier. It'll be in the presentation that we're going to show here in just a little bit, but we'll make sure to put that in the question and answer link or box as well, so everybody can just click on it if they would like to. Terrell Holder, how will you know the environment will be protected if you don't know its current state?
And that's not something that I can answer. All I can tell you is what Metro Council has directed us to look at, and that is directly related to the zoning code.
Terrell, I'll chime in a little bit as well that these aren't the only efforts that are out there in terms of environmental conditions that are happening along the Floyds Fork. Both of these processes are related more to land development code and the regulatory side of it, of our development review processes. So I think what you're talking about is probably a little bit bigger picture. I know a lot of folks on this call and a lot of folks at the state level and some of the metro level as well have done some analysis in terms of tree canopy, water conditions, various things like that that we're aware of. So we can help you steer you in the right direction on some of those, but to keep these processes kind of on track, I don't know that none of us have that professional expertise to personally be able to do that, but also it's probably a little bit beyond the scope of this process itself. Christina asks, where do you get information that the overlay district was created to be flexible, fluid, with guidelines or standards? Chris, that's probably.
So what I would say is the guidelines, many of the guidelines are written in what would be more of a guideline that you would see in a design overlay. Typical zoning overlays provide specific standards with shalls and musts and not encourage or should or coulds in them. Those are more guidelines where a committee is assigned to review against those guidelines. So typical zoning overlays don't have that kind of flexibility in them. When the Floyds Fork DRO was created, there was a concerted effort to make it more flexible, as flexible as it could be, being in the zoning regulations. And so that's when we say it's written more of a guideline instead of a standard or a regulation in some ways.
Thanks, Chris. And for those of you who would like it, the link to the Form District webpage at riverky.gov is now in the question and answer section. Make sure Casey put that in there for us. Let's see anybody else chiming in with questions. So we'll get started on the Conservation Form District here in about 7 minutes. And once again, you don't need to log off. Just hold tight and we'll use the same platform here in about 7 minutes to get that started. We'll start moving the panels. So.
I think there was one more question here from Lucas that says, why do you call it a design review overlay when the LDC calls it a development review overlay?
So again, we're getting confused between design review overlays like Bardstown Road or downtown overlay. I call it basically, it's the development review overlay is what the Floyds Fork DRO is. So it's a development review overlay. It's a zoning overlay since it's established within the zoning regulations. We got some discussion about design review overlays because there was a question about committees and that how other overlays have committees. And that's because design review overlays are not part of the zoning regulations. They have a separate local and state legislation that talks about those, and those are required to have committees, whereas the DRO itself is in the zoning code and does not have a specific committee for it.
Hey, Chris, real quick before we change over to conservation forum, asked to be able to pull up those directives from the Metro Council resolution one more time. Would it be possible to pull up that slide so everyone could see it?
Yeah, I should be able to do that. Let me get that.
All right, perfect. So it is 5:58, so I'm going to start moving members of the working group over to be panelists. If you would please stay muted until after we give a brief presentation. And then once we get the brief presentation, we're going to have a bit of an exercise where we'll be able to sort of answer questions and talk freely. But if you wouldn't mind to just stay muted until after that presentation.
All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed, made the most of your 8-minute break there. We are going to now transition into the Conservation Forum District Working Group. Again, we had requested through a couple of the meetings we had prior to this for folks to reach out to us to be members of the working group. We asked that we try to keep it to a manageable number, which we come relatively close to. We also asked that we kind of keep it to individual representatives, whether that be from an area, a neighborhood, an industry, an organization, whatever that might be. But we also need to ensure that we kind of have an open approach of the differing points of view that are going to come with this. I will say, and I think it's really important, so the working group is really established just for us to be able to look a little bit more technical at some of these ideas. Everything we're doing through this working group is not going to hold any more weight than anything else through the public process that we're going to utilize through this. The working group is intended for us to have sort of a manageable number of folks where we can dive maybe a little bit deeper into the weeds and have these discussions a little bit more on a sort of technical level from folks that are on the ground in areas where this might be applicable, or also from the development side of what's feasible and what's not. So I know there's some frustration out there of whom all we could put onto the working group. Again, the intent was for us to sort of keep a manageable number of folks here so that the working groups can be a little bit more focused, but it's not going to carry any more weight than the rest of the public processes. This is just another level of the engagement. So as you can see on the screen right now, here's the list of working group members. I believe everyone on here has been moved over to a panelist, which means you now have the ability to mute and unmute yourself as well as participate in the chat. I do ask that, if possible, just to keep a little bit of organization to the meeting. If you would like to speak, please just try to, there's a button on there where you can raise your hand, and we'll try and call on you. Or if you put comments into the chat, we will read those aloud to make sure that everyone can read those. So that's kind of the overview of the working group list. Does anybody, before we dive in, have any questions? Did that make sense? All right, well, we will proceed into the actual presentation itself then. So I'm going to go through these relatively quickly because most of you that are on the working group and most of you that are probably on this call have seen a lot of this stuff before. And I really want to get into sort of the meat of the conversation tonight. But just to recap from things we've already stated, this creation of these two new form districts is part of the larger RBC reform process that is ongoing right now. There's a large effort to overhaul a lot of our land development code to bring it up to modern day standards and some more ethical practices, and this is a component of that. Next slide, please, Rich Casey. Thank you. Again, Plan 2040, which is the city's comprehensive plan that was built on community engagement, specifically mentioned the creation of two new form districts. As our communities evolved, we recognize form districts were created in Cornerstone 2020, which was the predecessor to Plan 2040. Two new form districts seemed applicable for how our community continues to grow and what we need to do to grow intelligently. Next slide, please. Again, a bit of redundancy, but just to make sure everybody understands what form districts do. So form districts look more at the physical form and the pattern of development rather than the actual use and the density. The use and the density is taken through zoning districts. The two complement one another and collectively to develop the regulations for this. Form districts are intended to represent the unique pattern of development, with sort of the physical design criteria of specific areas. And the predominant things that form districts regulate are site design, including setbacks, building design, including heights, transitions, so how you go from one property to the next or one form district to the next, street and roadside design, open space, as well as other design related elements. Next slide, please, Rich Casey. Thank you. So I wanted to really kind of harp on this point. This is what is identified in our legislatively adopted Plan 2040, the comprehensive plan for the city. And this is the framework that we need to work within as we establish these regulations for the form districts. I've said this a lot, but I'll say it again. This process is just going to establish the regulations. It is not going to implement geographic placement of any of these form districts. So this is just the regulation. And keep in mind, we have to work within the framework identified in the comp plan. And I'll read these for you because it's important to keep in mind that this is sort of the general idea that we need to work within. The conservation form district is characterized by natural features and scenic landscapes, including agricultural land, woods and fields, creeks and streams, wildlife habitats, parklands, floodplains, and dark skies. Future development should preserve natural and historic resources while providing opportunities for low-impact, sustainable, and mixed-use development that include innovative housing varying in design, type, size, and affordability. Innovative and clustered developments are encouraged and incentivized. So in sort of summation of that, the idea of the conservation from district is by no means a preventing development. We recognize that development is property owners' right based on what they want to do with their property. But our hope is that by establishing some good regulations that work for everybody, we can still allow development while also preserving some of our natural resources, especially a lot of our tree canopy and our streams. And on top of that, providing a variety of housing types for design, type, size, and affordability. Next slide, please. So this is just kind of the overview of where we're going with this. Remember, there are two form districts. There's the one we're talking about tonight, the Conservation Form District, as well as the Urban Edge Form District, which is more applicable to sort of the edge of downtown. The two are running at the same time, but separate of one another. We are hoping to run them together as much as we can, but we will definitely not slow the process of one of those down if the other is taking a little bit longer to do. We started this process off with kind of an overview of what are we going to do to try and establish these. We held a community meeting specific to each of the form districts, and now we're at the point with the working group meetings where we're trying to get to that next level of input. That from here, our hope is the next phase of this, provided we can get enough information this evening, we'll be able to work to start to, at a very minimum, develop an outline of what those draft regulations are. From there, we will then start to really put those draft through a lot of public process through this working group to really start to put together the actual language of what that final will be. We'll then again present that to the community through the working groups as well as through some public forums, and then ultimately they will be adopted. So conservation form districts, I'm going to go over a little bit of what we heard at the visioning meeting we held on July 27th over at the Dean's Foundation Lodge. Saw a lot of your faces out there. Really appreciate you guys coming out and participating in there. We had 50-ish, I would say, people show up. And the exercise results, some were kind of what we expected and some were a little different than what we expected. But the big takeaways in terms of residential design, we weren't all surprised to see there's not a clear consensus on things like building height, setbacks, and garage locations. Commercial design, we were a little bit surprised to see that there is a preference for multiple uses, minimal setbacks, and 2 to 3 story building heights in general. Streams and waterways, there was no clear consensus on regulations for certain types of streams, but there was definitely consensus for maintaining the existing regulations on the perimeter or larger streams. And with the subdivision lotting patterns, sort of how you lay out the lots within a subdivision, there was an emphasized importance on natural resources. And so you can go to louisvilleky.gov/new forms. All of these are online, but these are images of the exact boards that we utilized at that public meeting. And as you can see, kind of like I said, on the residential design, there wasn't a clear consensus. There wasn't a standout. It's a little bit all over the place in terms of what people were looking for. But on the commercial design of things, people seem to be pretty much on the same page of sort of the mix of uses, distance of buildings to property lines, those sort of things, everybody seemed to be in consensus. So glad we seem to at least be starting on a little bit of common ground with the commitments of this. So just kind of wanted to talk briefly over a couple other proposals that are out there. I believe for the people that are on the working group itself, I sent a couple of attachments with the explanatory email that I sent out. The first one is what was the illustrative draft, as we repeatedly called it, through the South Floyds of Fork area. One of those was the, again, very draft version of what the Conservation Forest District regulations themselves would look like. And additionally, there was the low impact subdivision incentive that was in there as well. So those were the ones, again, that were established through the South Floyds Fork area plan. They're just ideas, they're just drafts. I just wanted to share those with you as potential building blocks going forward of what some of the conversation has been so far. Additionally, Louisville Metro on July 19th received some proposed ideas from several residents of Floyds Fork and some concerned citizens. We've reviewed those. We think we want to utilize those as part of this conversation of what could work well and what couldn't work well. So I went ahead and shared that with the group as well as an attachment. Again, those are not anything that's proposed by Louisville Metro. Those are given to Louisville Metro on behalf of some residents and some concerned citizens. I wanted to share those with you again as sort of the building blocks for this conversation of kind of where people are starting from with this process. So again, kind of, if you think about where Conservation Forest District, we are not placing this geographically, but I think everyone could agree that there's some general ideas that the areas that probably need Conservation Forest District the most are predominantly existing neighborhood forest district. And there's a lot of words on this slide, but the gist of what we put on here is that the neighborhood forest district is the very baseline of what we need to do. We're not going to do anything less than what neighborhood form currently sets out. These are the prototypical subdivision developments that you see throughout most of Louisville Metro. Obviously, from the opinion of other people and from the directive of the comprehensive plan itself, we need to rethink how we're doing this in some of our most environmentally sensitive areas. So again, the neighborhood form is going to be our baseline of where we're starting from. We're not doing anything less than what neighborhood form currently regulates. This is an example that we used a lot for those that participated in the South Floyds Fork area study. It's Sandy, it's in Atlanta, Georgia. And this we think is really beneficial because obviously a lot of folks, the predominant concern is the preservation of Floyds Fork and its watershed. This development in Atlanta, Georgia, called Sandy, was specifically designed to protect the Chattahoochee River watershed, which was endangered down there. So this is a development that went in with, that was its sole purpose. On top of that, it does a lot of the things that our comprehensive plan definition of a conservation plan district say we should really entail with this. And that is a mixture of building types and uses, clustered development so that we can better protect natural resources and provide opportunities for shared open space. And it's built within the natural landscape to allow for the appropriate transitions between residential and non-residential. So we just wanted to kind of share this example as an idea. So conservation versus neighborhood. The conservation needs to be different, truthfully, from the neighborhood form. So the conservation form, again, going to beat you guys over the head with that, but it's really important. This is what was said in the comprehensive plan. It's characterized by natural features, scenic landscapes, agricultural land, woods and fields, creeks and streams, wildlife habitats, parklands, floodplains, and dark skies. And the goals of the conservation form are low impact sustainable growth, diversity of housing design type, unit size, and affordability, clustered development that is meant to minimize disturbance and maximize open space, innovative and environmentally friendly methods of development, especially with regards to wastewater disposal, stormwater, energy runoff, and multimodal transportation connections. Neighborhood forum does not include design elements that allow for the proper preservation of natural resources, and open space in a variety of housing types. So again, this is not an effort to stymie development. It's rather an opportunity for us to look at a new way to potentially develop in some of our most environmentally sensitive areas. So our kind of big question for tonight, is what we're trying to get to, is what standards can be developed to meet these goals for the conservation forest district. All right, so now we are going to try something. Hopefully this will work. I will preface before we get into this phase of the process where we are trying to get as much public input as we can, and then try and take that and put kind of pen to paper to start putting together an outline of regulations, is inevitably going to be messy. There's no easy way to do this. We are doing the best that we think we can with this, but we really appreciate your input and everything with this. So we ask that you be very inclusive with everything we'd like to see in this, because we need as much information as possible for us to be able to draft this. But again, it's going to be a messy process at first. We recognize that. So all the panelists can go to, we're going to use an online survey platform tonight called Mentimeter. So if you go to menti.com, you can either do it on your phone. There's a mobile app if you want to do it, or through the internet browser on your phone, or you can just open the survey in a separate tab on your computer browser right now. It's menti.com. We're going to go through this presentation. We're going to put the code into the chat for the panelists that are on here for the specific working group members. From there, you'll go to menti.com. I think Mr. Casey just put the link over there for you to make it nice and easy. So you go to menti.com. There's the direct link at the top, or you can go to menti.com and then enter that code that is in the chat. After tonight, hopefully as soon as tomorrow, we're going to put this exact same survey onto the website and ask for anybody and everybody that would like to provide feedback to the exact same questions we are going to ask you this evening. We just wanted tonight to, again, keep it to a little bit more focused of a discussion with some folks that we know have some specific sort of skin in the game on this conversation. So for tonight, we're just asking that the working group itself participate in this. But then going forward, again, we will have this posted on the website at riverky.gov/uniforms. And then anyone and everyone, hopefully as soon as tomorrow, can start taking this survey. All right. Is there anybody that is not on menti.com right now?
I am not on yet.
I'm not.
Yeah, we'll give it a minute or so. It takes a minute. We can see how many people log in.
Did you say it's in chat?
So if you're having trouble on the right side of the screen, or even at the bottom, you can click a button that says chat, and that's going to open it up. At the very bottom of that chat, there's a direct link to menti.com, which takes you straight to this survey. Or you can, if it's easier, go to menti.com and then enter the code that is in the chat there as well.
I'm not seeing it in the chat.
Oh,
It should be at the very bottom, so you probably got to scroll down to the bottom of the chat. It will come from Rachel Casey to all the panelists somewhere.
Mike, for some reason, I am having trouble, the same problem. I'm not seeing a current link.
you gotta scroll in the chat. I'm having difficulty too, but you gotta scroll in that chat.
Yeah, once you get into the chat, scroll all the way down to
it's
the bottom of the chat. And then you'll see
What?
menti.com. There's a link you can click on.
What is the code? They're asking for a code.
Make sure you're
Sure.
in the chat and not the Q&A.
Yeah, there's a Q&A and a chat, and it's in the chat section of this.
So,
So once you're in, I mean, I'm on and it said it's waiting for the presenter to show the next slide. So we're not seeing the same slide that you're seeing there, I don't think.
It'll pop up in just a second. We're just waiting for everybody to get in.
Sure.
If you would please just audibly provide the code. For some reason, I do not have visibility to
Sure.
chat.
So, and again, we would really appreciate it if just the working group participates in this tonight, and then as of tomorrow, anybody and everybody can do this. But the code is 3452 7018. So I'll repeat it, 3452 7018.
Mike, can you repeat the website again too, please?
Sure, it's Menti, MENTI.com.
I'm sorry, but I'm at the bottom of the chat and I see nothing.
Okay. Can you just open up a separate tab on your browser? On your internet browser?
Yeah, let me see. Okay.
so Mike, I should be looking at, please wait for the presenter.
Yes.
Okay. I made it. So,
Welcome. We're glad to have you.
I'm in.
okay.
All right, Barbara, how are you doing?
I'm working on it.
All right. I see more and more numbers popping up there at the bottom of how many people are in there, so that's a good sign. And Barbara, in the chat, Rachel Casey just sent you directly. So if you click on chat, not Q&A, but chat on the WebEx presentation, there's a link that's yours.
Yeah, I'm in my browser and it's not going. Let me go back to the chat. Come on, give me a break.
Barbara, were you able to find that link that Rachel Casey sent directly to you?
Yeah, I'm working on giving the info it's asking for.
Okay. All right, so hopefully I think we got everybody to put their contact information in there, and apologies for the confusion getting there, but glad we all got here together. So the first question we've got here, just very simple, kind of warm up and icebreaker question is just, what does conservation mean to you? So like in a word or two, if a sentence, whatever you want to do, just type that in there. And then this will populate it automatically so we can see it kind of in real time what folks are saying. All right, the answers are starting to pour in now, so I'll kind of read them as they start to come in. So preserving natural environmental resources, not wasteful, retaining natural resources that allows for them to exist, expand, and stay healthy, saving natural resources, water, land, animals, fish, protecting and saving things that are important to you, only using as much as you need. I will give it another 30 seconds, so if anybody else wants to add any input, preserve and protect natural resources. It means to protect assets in the state that is desirable and beneficial to the community. Protecting and preserving our natural resources, especially waterways, forests, wildlife, wetlands, floodplains, and dark skies. It is first determining an important component, then working to sustain and protect that component. And then identifying and protecting environmental health and integrity and not exceeding the carrying capacity of natural systems. Reducing waste. We have another one in there for reducing waste. So I think this is really helpful. And again, we'll have all this saved and we can put this on the website, but we're going to proceed on to the next one. And this is where we're going to start to get a little bit more specific with the questions. So we can tell how many people have responded. So we'll try and wait until everybody has responded to these. But this question is basically you're gonna rank these things from 1 to 5, 1 being the most important. It doesn't mean number 5 is not important to you necessarily, but what is the most important to you? So rank each of these standards below on the importance to achieving the goals conservation forum. So you have setbacks, lot size, building height, mix of uses, or shared open space. And we'll give everybody a minute or so to kind of go through there, and it'll start populating our results here in just a minute. So again, rank them 1st to 5th, 1st being most important, 5th being the least important of these 5, but not necessarily unimportant. All right, we got 5 responses, and it's being split right down the middle for a few of these, but we should be getting a few more in here. I'll give it another 20 seconds or so if anybody else wants to put theirs in. All right, 5 more seconds. If you're debating between what's number 3 and 4, now's a good time. You got to make a choice. All right, well, as you can see, it helps us really populate these in real time. And I think it's an interesting way to be able to get everybody's opinion without everyone talking over each other with some of these ideas and concepts. But at this point, so it looks like shared open space was the most popular in terms of achieving goals of conservation forum, followed by setbacks, then the mix of uses, and then lot size and building height being the last of those. Again, doesn't necessarily mean they're not important, but in terms of the voting from these 5, those are the least important out of these. Does anybody want to elaborate on why they put one where they did? You're welcome to kind of speak up now and let us know your opinion on that.
Yeah, Mike, Jeff Frank. I think there are.
Jeff, real quick, I don't mean to interrupt you, Jeff. I'm sorry. If you start speaking, if you wouldn't mind, just say your name and kind of who you're with or what you're representing, just so everybody knows.
Yeah, super. Jeff Frank, Friends of Floyd's Fork. I think there's several metrics that were part of the package, the neighborhood group package that you sent out in terms of the 11 conservation form district standards, and there's a mix of things that impervious surface, tree canopy, those are metrics that to my mind would pop to the top of the list. And with that, I'll turn it back, Mike, but I think there are more meaningful metrics that have higher importance, is my point, to achieving the goals of the conservation forum than the 5 we just looked at and voted on.
Nope, that's a great point and a great statement. I'll say that it's kind of by design that we put some of these in here because I think it's pretty obvious that the tree canopy is going to be an important component of this. These are the ones that when we really start to get into sort of the design guidelines of how development can occur out in this area in a sustainable way, these are the ones that we probably need the most help. So in saying that, that certainly doesn't preclude, if it's not on this list, we're not including that. It may be something that is either sort of, we think sort of common knowledge is something that needs to come into this, or some, these are really the ones that we need the most input on for us to be able to start kind of drafting some ideas about regulations for that. Right? So I appreciate the comment.
Thank you.
Hey, Mike, it's Kent.
Yes.
Hey, I had ranked lot size as
Can
number
you
one.
introduce yourself real quick?
Oh, Kent Goody, landscape architect, Mendel Scott Associates. I had ranked lot size higher up on the list, basically number one, just because thinking that lot size had a greater importance to this, because if we could reduce the lot size, that allows the shared open space to increase. So anyway, and I'm not sure if that is how that was meant when you put lot size in that ranking. So I guess maybe elaborate on what you were thinking when lot size was introduced in there.
Yep. So in full transparency, we were trying to be a little ambiguous and this is why I wanted to hear conversations from folks about it afterwards. If somebody put lot size, like in your case, Kent, because you think smaller lot sizes with more compact development then obviously preserves more space. Or some people might think that larger lot sizes, as a result, if you have larger individual lot sizes, then you're preserving more space by that means. So that's why I was hoping, again, we kind of intentionally left them a little bit that way to leave it open to some interpretation. And that's what we wanted to hear from the conversation is how people think of this in general.
Hey, Mike, it's Kelly Jones. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a landscape architect at Back Wilson and Lingo. And I kind of agree with what Kent said. I agree with what Frank said. But also, as far as setbacks, that's a bit ambiguous as well. If you're talking setbacks from Floyd's Fork specifically, or from whatever stream specifically, then I think it becomes more important. I actually ranked that last, because when you're thinking about setbacks as far as front yards and side yards and things like that, I don't think that really has as big of a impact on what we need to be discussing here. I do think lot size is key, because if we can do smaller lot sizes, if we can do taller buildings, 2-story or even potentially some 3-story type townhomes, to reduce our footprint, that reduces then our impervious area and increases the amount of green space we can have.
Well, it's a great point, and I think the reason we put that in there is a lot of these you can't necessarily have one without the other. So if you have small lot sizes, you can't have 75-foot setbacks from any component yard, whether it be a side yard or a front yard. So to look at those, and again, this is just for us to get ideas and start to generate this conversation. Same with building height. People could think like building height's not important to me because I'm thinking it's on 1 story, and then somebody else could say building height's not important to me because like 5 stories is just not going to get to this. So it's a great point, but yeah, these again are sort of the ideas that overlap on each other. So as we start to think through how we can work these regulations in a little bit, it's very interesting to hear your perspectives on it. So I appreciate it.
So Mike, this is Kurt Mason, retired from USDA, representing the Louisville Jefferson County Environmental Trust, Land Trust Organization. So of the choices that were offered, I mean, I put setback as being one of the more vital, important considerations. And I looked at that through the lens of setback from where. And of course, if streams are important and water quality and integrity is important, setbacks have a very important role in what you're trying to protect. If it's scenic value and scenic beauty from roadways, then that setback also becomes important, but more importantly, on those setbacks is the content of what's in the setback that becomes important, which goes back to some of those things that Jeff Frank was talking about. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. That was something that definitely came up through the South Floyd Fourth Plan is while setbacks from a stream are important, it's even more important what's within those setbacks, because that's the things that can help filter some of the nasty stuff out before it gets into the water. But then on the other side, I mean, it's a challenge. If we want to preserve more space, how do we do that if we need that that sort of natural feeling setback from the road to be farther? Then inevitably you have larger lot sizes. And if you have larger lot sizes, then you start to tend to spread out more. So I love the perspective on it, and I appreciate you sharing that. Anybody else before we move on to the next one? We've still got a few more, so I don't want to burn all your zest for a conversation early, but appreciate the input so far. This is really beneficial for us.
Hey, Mike, it's Ken again.
Yeah.
On the mixed use category, and this is, I guess, really more just a contemplation on my part. You know, we don't have, you know, in Serenbe, you know, they created in a situation where it's almost like Norton Commons, where you created your own area for your commercial development, so that it's fed by the residents that work and live there. You know, similar to Norton Commons. And we don't have too many commercial corridors within, let's just say the conservation area, maybe for Floyd's Fork. So while I think mixed uses may rank very high, you know, for everybody, because we all want to see mixed use, the actuality of mixed use may, I won't say a lost leader, but it may be something that's, you know, unattainable, I guess is what I'm getting at. So anyway, just food for thought.
Now, are you saying unattainable because form dictates design or zoning dictates use, or unattainable because there's not a strong commercial need out there right now?
Yeah, just not a strong commercial need out there, because you know we've seen a lot of mom and pop stores that used to be our corner grocery store out there that's closed because of lack of, you know, retail. And we've seen a little bit of growth, like say at Beckley Station and Shelbyville Road. Now that's, you know, it's gaining some momentum in that area.
Sure.
And yeah, on the front end, when we're doing this conservation, I don't know. It'd be nice to to have that option, that tool, as we get into, I guess, further down the road, and it should be built in. I agree. I'm just looking at, can we create a commercial node that everybody can agree on for the mixed use portion, and would that be tucked into one of these areas versus as being on the front end of some of these areas?
Nope. Yeah. Thanks for clarifying that. That makes a lot of sense. It's not a question on here, but I think we would get consensus. If we talked about traffic, if anybody likes traffic, everybody's going to say no, I don't like traffic. I think it's probably fair to say that it's inevitable that population is going to increase out in this area. And as the population increases, if we don't provide a mechanism to sort of internalize this mix of uses for local services and needs, it's just going to shoot them back out to those arterials because they're going to get where the existing ones are. So it's just something we want to frame around potential ideas, but I really appreciate your input on that. All right, we're going to move on to the next slide. So again, this one's more scale of 1 to 5, 5 representing strongly agree. So you strongly agree with this. Rank these statements below. Shared community open space is better for conservation than private open space. Walkable neighborhoods are important to healthy communities. Amenities like grocery stores should be located close to where people live. And a variety of housing options promotes community resilience. So scale 1 to 5, how much do you agree with these? 5 meaning you agree the most with it. You guys are getting the hang of this now because answers are popping in a little bit quicker. All right, looks like we're a little over halfway to all of our respondents, so we'll give it another 30 seconds or so for folks to put it in.
Mike, this is
Yes.
Barbara. I'm sorry, but I do not see how you enter the number that you choose. You're just gonna go, well, I'm sorry.
This is Steve Porter, I've got the
It's
same.
it's like a scale where you just kind of slide it, and as you
Right.
slide it, it'll give you the
Okay,
number I know.
Okay, gotcha. Well, if it would slide, that'd be great.
Yeah, Mike, I've got the same problem. All I'm seeing is the results so far. I can't enter a 5 or a 3 or a 4.
I can't slide it either.
I'm gonna pull in my technical expert. Richard Case, do you have any ideas on what that could be? So apologies, it's kind of tough to tell without being able to look at it. I'm just seeing it on the back end. I'm not participating in the survey itself.
I'm
Yeah,
in on the browser. Does that make a difference?
Shouldn't make a difference at all, no.
I was gonna say, make sure you're looking at it on the survey, the actual survey, and not on the presentation, because on the
that's a good
presentation is
point.
where it's showing it's where the presentation is showing the results, but in the browser, it shouldn't be showing, I don't think, any results. I don't know. I got mine in pretty early, so.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. That's a great point.
Well, I could not get it on my browser, so this is pretty frustrating.
Barbara, were you able to participate in the last questions?
No.
No, same here.
And you guys aren't doing it from the WebEx browser, you're doing it on the separate tab for where Mentimeter is?
Right.
Yeah. Well, my apologies for that. If you guys want to, you can kind of discuss it out loud. And then again, the survey is going to be up for everybody as soon as tomorrow. So we can take it then. But kind of quickly looking over the results here, it's pretty interesting. Nothing is really like, all these are important. Ultimately, it looks like consumption. They're more important than not important to everyone on here. The walkable neighborhoods are important to healthy communities, seems to be the one people most agree with, followed by a variety of housing options promotes community resilience, followed by the amenities of grocery stores should be close to where people live. And then the last is shared community open space. It's better for conservation than private open space. Steve or Barbara, I'll give you guys the floor if you want to kind of verbally say what your thoughts are on this, but don't feel obligated to if you don't want to.
Okay, this is Steve Porter.
Sure.
There seems to be some inconsistency between the last group and this one, where the shared community open space is the least popular of these 4, although they're all fairly close. But before that was fairly strong. So I'm a little confused, I guess.
I was thinking the same. I thought that was kind of an interesting dynamic to it. Anybody want to elaborate on why they might have ranked it more on the last one and less on this one?
So this is Kelly Jones again. I actually wanted to comment on that one specifically because I can see maybe that having or being on both sides of the scale. I can see where folks would say, yes, having it as private open space is going to preserve it, because if it was my private open space, I would preserve it. But I also know plenty of people, and I've come across them in my career, that say they don't want trees. They don't want to have the maintenance of breaking leaves, and they think trees are nuisances, and they're going to go out there and they're going to mow everything down. So for me, I was on, well, I put everything at a 5. So, but, but particularly on that one, because I feel like you have a better chance at making sure that it stays preserved if it's a community open space, whereas a private owner could come out there and decide, well, they don't really care about preserving it, and they might not necessarily do that. We hear our clients all the time tell us that people come out of their houses and cut down the street trees they've planted because they don't want a tree in front of their house. So, that's where my number 5 came in at.
Love it. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, and then it's something we talk about a lot. A lot of people love their yard, and they love their yard to look really nice, so they're out there cutting it pretty often and putting fertilizer and things like that on there, which may not be the most beneficial to environmental resources.
This is Steve again. I'm looking at the one about amenities, and especially when it says like grocery stores. Let's be realistic. Most grocery stores are going to be 40, 50, 60, 70,000 square feet. The neighborhood 3,000 or 4,000 square foot grocery store just isn't going to survive, as somebody said earlier. And so it seems to me that that kind of an amenity does not need to be located within a conservation area, but I don't think we're going to have a conservation area that is so big that people can't get to a grocery store fairly easily.
True. Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe we should have used a different example of an amenity in there, but that's everybody wants to be close to their grocery store somehow or somewhere. But yeah, that's a good point, Steve.
Well,
if you're in a conservation area, you don't want to be close to a 50,000 square foot big box.
100%.
Mike, this is Barbara. About the amenities, grocery stores just don't exist on their own. They're usually accompanied by other commercial developments. So I don't know. I happen to agree with Steve. They can be nearby to the conservation form district, but I don't think it's totally necessary that they are within the form district.
Okay. Yeah. Again, we maybe could have picked a different example, but appreciate the input on that one.
Mike, if it's okay, Jeff Frank, couple of observations on
Sure.
the private public open space debate. I kind of looked at it from my background with Future Fund. Land banked a lot of stuff that ended up being public with the Parklands. And at the same time, there are almost 2,000 acres that are privately protected by a land trust, or what LJSET does or others hold conservation easements. And done right, those open spaces, to Kelly's point, if they're managed for the right values, have a lot of benefit. So I was kind of on the fence about that. At the community group suggestions, when we get into that later in the process, we've said pretty clearly, I think walkable's important, and having neighborhood level services, village scale, whether that's professional practice, health, shopping, and so forth, where it can be integrated, where the infrastructure supports it, should be part of what we're thinking about as we build out the rest of the area. So with that, I'll wrap.
All right, no, I agree with that also. Thanks for sharing, Jeff. All right, just to keep us on track, I'm going to move us on to the next slide. Pretty easy, so hopefully we'll get this one kind of fast. True or false questions. I'll pick one or the other. I would prefer shared open space such as a park or a walking trail over large private yards that have a better conservation of natural resources. I'll read it again one time just while we're kind of getting the last of our responses in. I would prefer shared open space such as a park or walking trail over large private yards as a better conservation of natural resources.
This is Steve, because I can't do it online. You can add me to the true side.
Gotcha. We got you down, Steve. Barbara, you have a preference you care to share with everyone, or you can come in and on us to rock, brother.
Well, I'm sort of
There's no
like
wrong
Jeff.
answer.
There are people who do conserve their properties, so I can't say 100% true. I understand what Kelly said. I just don't find that out in this area where I live. Everybody loves the trees.
This is Steve again. I might point out, kind of getting to Barbara's point, even with large private areas, if there are deed restrictions or homeowners association restrictions that would preserve the natural resources, then private yards could still be a good, a good way to preserve those resources. But you would need to have some either deed restriction or homeowners association restrictions to guarantee that.
Nope, it's a good point, Steve. We as Metro don't have much authority over those deed restrictions or homeowner association restrictions. So from our perspective, we've got to look at it at a bit of a larger scale. But I wholeheartedly agree with you. But that kind of then comes down to the mercy of each individual neighborhood.
Steve, this is Kelly again, and I agree with that as well. However, I mean, those street trees that I spoke of earlier are deed restricted, and that doesn't matter. They come and pull them out of their yard. They come and pull them out of the street. I mean, deed restrictions be darned, which is why I land on the public open space or community open space side of the table.
I can't imagine where that is and where is enforcement, but anyway, yeah, it's tough. I mean, I think part of my confliction is we're talking about new developments as opposed to what's existing, maybe large acreage areas that have trees. So I think that's where I have some confliction.
Sure.
Mike, this is Juva with the BIA. I'm sorry I haven't been participating more, but it's the evening and it's time for me to run my kids to all of their practices. So
I can relate, Juva. Thank you for making time.
it makes for a crazy evening. One thing I wanted to say about this, and I'm not sure I agree or disagree or true or false on either one of these things, but I have to bring this up earlier, and I should have brought it up earlier in the conversation. Conservation form is important, but we have to talk about the variety of housing types, affordability, and the variety of people who are going to need housing. They're going to be at all different economic levels. And the one reason I would land on the true side of this is, the land is one of the most expensive investments when it comes to new development. If we are able to have higher densities, we can potentially achieve our community goals of making, addressing that 30,000 unit shortage of housing. So I just want to keep that in mind. Affordability has to be a part of this conversation and all of these questions, and then B, say that we have to take that into consideration when you put these true false kinds of questions out there. So thank you all.
So thank you, Juva. Appreciate you sharing. And yeah, there's I know we made this a black and white issue on this question, but there's definitely some in between on it. But again, the conservation form is sort of directed by Plan 2040. Plan 2040 definitely
This is
speaks to
Steve.
the
Let
need for
me,
more housing.
This is Steve. Let me support kind of what Juva was getting to. If you have smaller lots and larger areas of open space, that means you spend less money doing roads and sewers and other utilities, and that land then becomes a lot cheaper to develop, and therefore the houses or apartments or condos or whatever they might be can be lower priced because you haven't had to have those major expenses of putting streets over a whole 100-acre piece of property.
Steve, Jeff here, Mike, I'm chiming in. I think the other part of this becomes, it's got to be part of this discussion is connectivity. You've touched on it from a public transportation perspective, but to have neighborhoods that are within 0.4 of a mile of the parklands out here in this area and have to try to navigate 1.5 miles of roads to get to them without sidewalks, we need to be providing for walking connectivity to both our shopping areas and our parklands and open spaces. So that's part of the greenways web that MSD tried to address 30, 20 years ago. It should be an integral part of how we build. We have several subdivisions out here, Canterbrook Farms among them, where there were trail dedications along our major creeks that have since lapsed because we didn't get around to building them, and they would connect our subdivisions to our park if that had happened. So that's part of the puzzle as well.
Yeah, it's a great point. Like if people, as it looks to be on here, prefer shared open space to yards, people aren't going to prefer shared open spaces if they can't safely get there without having in their car, having to drive a 0.5 mile or a mile, whatever it might be. So it's a good point, Jeff. All right, I'm going to keep us moving on just to try and keep us on track as much as we can. So we're basically going to show you kind of 3 images here. It's kind of that visual preference idea. And it's just three separate styles of development that are out there. This first one is basically what you would see in a neighborhood film district. It's 1/4 acre lots, strictly residential, single family development. So that's sort of example 1. Example number 2 is the sort of larger than 1/4 acre developments. So a lot of times these get upwards of 5 acres and even more on individual properties. But again, it's predominantly residential development on lots that are larger than a 1/4 acre. So you tend to see these more in the RR areas. You can see them in R4, those kind of places, but that's where you predominantly see them as well. And third, we'll like this, but this is an image of this sort of clustered idea of development. So lots on smaller than a 1/4 acre. So these are the ones that you cluster and you have the smaller lot sizes and inevitably preserve more open space. So pretty easy on here. In your opinion, which of these development patterns best meets the goals of conservation flow? So you just kind of choose which one you think best meets those goals of what we're trying to achieve with conservation flow. Wait for another 30 seconds or so. Looks like we, based on our number to date, have about 4 more people to vote. Now 3, and then we'll allow our verbal voters to speak as well. Steve, Barb, if you want to finish these up, if you guys have any input on this, want to give people another few seconds to put their votes in. No, again, don't feel obligated, but if you guys want to share your opinion, we'd be happy to hear it.
I think I've got it in the community center now.
Go ahead,
Okay,
Steve.
cool.
Go ahead, Steve.
No, I'm just gonna say, I'm now in the Q&A and put my 3 in, and I think it worked.
Oh,
So Steve, just as a heads up, are you using the Minty thing?
No, I'm on the Q&A on the, now. I think it, when I hit 3, the number went right up. I don't know. Anyway, I'm for example 3.
I cracked that code, but yeah, we got you. Thank you.
well, put me down for a 3.
All right, well, it looks like we got a couple more people to vote on here, but it looks like for the most part, everybody's into number 3, which seems to be the kind of theme that everybody seems to be in relative agreement on, is this idea of smaller lot sizes, sort of increasing density in a smaller area, then utilizing that as the principle to preserve more open space. There's a couple on the larger than quarter acre and one for the actual quarter acre sort of subdivision development. But for the most part, it seems like most people are kind of in agreement that the smaller lot patterns seem to be the best means of achieving this. Is that a fair statement, you guys think?
I think you're right, Mike. Would you put the image back up for number example 3 again?
That would.
Yeah. So I guess the issue that I kind of had with the example was that it just seemed somewhat disconnected. I guess it was why I was kind of, there was a lot of brown in there. So maybe it was just my first impression over 3, because I probably would have went with 3. So anyway, that was it. And you can you can shift my 1 example to a 3. But I agree with the smaller lot size. It was just a little, I don't know, maybe there's a better example of it. I get what you're getting at on here. It just didn't, I don't know. Anyway, sorry to ramble on, but it
No,
looked
you're
a little
good.
it just looked a little discombobulated.
We had difficulty finding a good sort of aerial image to visualize this. And we thought the same thing of like, oh man, I hope everybody doesn't see this brown on here and think that it's like we're doing a strip mine site or anything like that. And then you can't really see the roads very well either. But I think the kind of takeaway from it is you can see that there's several houses and probably some mixed use that's being developed in here in this clustered style fashion. And then the road infrastructure is a little less because you're not having to build as many roads and things like that. But you're preserving a ton of that tree canopy, especially in this example, but there's also some of those shared common areas and things like that.
I think this one's a little misleading. This is Kelly Jones again. I think this one's a little misleading as well, just because I assume this site has some significant topography based on the way the road loops around like that. And I think that although we have some topography in this area, a lot of these sites aren't going to be quite that topographic. And I think that you've got quite a bit of road length here with no development on either side, which doesn't keep the cost down as well. So I think that that's a little bit of something I thought of when I saw this slide as well. I think we can do this, but I think we can do it better than this too.
Love it. I love some aspirational goals. Thanks, Kelly.
Kelly, Frank, Kent, I think I agree with both of your concerns. There's kind of a mix in the middle, perhaps, that we should be striving for. One of the metrics that the neighborhood groups proposed is impervious cover. There are plenty of other metrics we ought to include if we're serious. You know, how much tree canopy we have to start with, what's the health and size, maturity level of that canopy, you know, what are the areas in the study area that, where are we currently at impervious cover right now today, where have we got room to grow and not blow out streams. So we'll get into it more as these meetings unfold, but I think there's some clear guidance from peer cities and in best practice about how we could do this.
Yep.
And this is Kurt. And looking at that picture, I mean, the first thing that hit me was from a building perspective, it's lack of available choice. So this picture kind of indicated to me that it was driven more in that design because of the constraints of the possibility of steep landscapes and maybe rock outcrops or whatever else might be. One of the challenges in building in an area where you don't really have all those constraints, but there still needs to be that consideration of connectivity, not to the built instruction, the built environment, but towards more of the environmental aspects of what you're protecting that's off-site, makes it a little bit more challenging in the discussion. So this one was more driven because of some constraints, I would be interested in looking at a picture like that, maybe that picture of number 2, where it doesn't seem to have the constraints, but by choice, there was a concerted effort to protect areas around that and how those clusters would look.
That's great. Now, I would encourage you guys, if you ever want, if you get dorky like me and want to play around on maps from time to time, there's some pretty good street view analysis of that Serenbe Farm. So if you just go on Google Maps and Google Serenbe Farms, it'll take you right there, and you can drop in on the streets. There's a little topography there, but it's not crazy from what I'm looking at. So just something to keep in mind. But I hear you guys on the sort of context sensitive design approach, and it's something we definitely need to consider with this.
And it's Juva again, Mike. And since you brought Serenbe Farms up, I'm going to comment on it.
Go for it.
Serenbe Farms is gorgeous. It's beautiful. And then if you price those homes, I think
Oh yeah,
multi-million-dollar homes, right? So, I mean, I go back to the density is great. I think that people will appreciate the density. I think our population now is right at this moment is focused on, less maintenance and those kinds of things. But affordability has to come into this because you're talking about conservation. And if you look at number 3, you're assuming that, I mean, who owns that property that is not developed? Somebody has had to pay for that. So if that is all conserved and not developable, somewhere that developer, that price is going to be impacted. The price of those homes is going to be impacted, or the projects. Do you see what I mean? So you have
absolutely.
to cover the cost of that property somehow. And I just don't know. I don't know how that happens. So again, I have to bring that up.
Yep, absolutely. And while we think it's a good example of kind of the design, and we continue to reference it, it's also the Atlanta market. So I mean that there's a built-in inflation cost there to begin with. But I think Kelly said it well of like, Serenbe is great, nice and everything, but let's aim to do something better. Let's figure out what's going to work for everybody here to where there is the correct yield on the property, so that it's a sustainable development, both in terms of the environmental impact, but also the economic side of it. So this is more just kind of referential than anything else. And I think we should absolutely aspire to try and find what's going to work best for everyone out here. But I appreciate that. It's a great point, Jim, and that affordability has got to be at this conversation throughout. So really appreciate you kind of bringing that home.
Mike, this is Barbara. I'd also like to think about how much open space there would be, maybe develop a ratio as best as possible, or the amount of open space to the density of the development.
So you're saying kind of if you wanted to go denser, you would need to provide more open space, basically?
Yeah, you're going to have more people, so you need to accommodate that in the open space.
Sure. I think it's certainly something we can consider as we start putting these regulations together.
Well, and again, when we get into what the neighborhood's been talking about, the second slide we've looked at looks like pretty typical RR development out here.
Right.
One house on about 5 acres. When you run the numbers, that's 2 to 3% impervious cover. When you run the numbers on R4, it's almost 45% impervious cover. And part of our package clearly identifies the level at which those impacts exceed the carrying capacity of the stream. You can mitigate up to a point with stormwater solutions, but once you get over a particular threshold of 10 or 15%, certainly 10, you start doing damage if you're not mitigating. Beyond 20 or 30% impervious cover, restoration specialists don't waste their time. You're not going to get ahead of the problems you've created. So whatever our metrics are, tree canopy, impervious cover, open space percentage, those are all part of this equation. If we build in a clustered fashion, build to provide village level services, those are all the things that we're recommending in the community group's recommendations, and will enable us to realize this vision of keeping Floyd's Fork as a healthy resource. That's part of what's been adopted by Metro. So We've got plenty of metrics to use when we get into what we're going to measure success or failure by.
Yep, and it's
One of
interesting,
the
if you look at example 1 to example 2, you're right, example 1 probably has more impervious surface, but it looks like it also has more tree canopy than example 2, so it's something we've got to take into account with all of these, so I appreciate that.
And what are we starting with? If you look at Canterbrook Farms out here, it was an open soybean field with no tree canopy, so we obviously want to provide for planting versus another parcel proposed for development that's 95% tree canopy, all mature, and protects a high quality stream that drains into the parkland. So we can burrow down on the details and should if we're serious about the goal.
And we certainly will at some point, but we got to start somewhere. This is kind of the starting point of where we're hoping it's going to give us sort of that original information where we can start coming up with some ideas that we can develop a little bit better.
You know, a key component of true conservation is that we don't just say, well, we're not going to build on places where we can't build very easily. You know, there will be places where you could build easily, but you shouldn't build in order to preserve forest there, to preserve wildlife, to preserve dark skies, to preserve wetlands, whatever. But just because something is buildable, let's don't say that we can build on it and then only not build on the areas that have steep slopes or riparian problems.
Sure, that's a good point of kind of if we're going to preserve natural resources, make sure we're preserving the correct natural resources. All right, we got about 18 minutes left of how long I said I'd keep you, and I want to be respectful of your time, so I'm keep moving on. So on this one, just pick 2. If residential developments have lot sizes less than a quarter acre, they should also, what are kind of your top 2 out of these 4 ideas that you think they should have as well? If we're going with this, if we were to go with the smaller lot sizes. I'll give you guys a minute or so to get your input on that one.
Only like one choice. Can I make my own other choice? Huh.
You can put it in the chat for sure. All right, we are pretty close to our number of people that are voting on there, so I'll go ahead and open it up for just a couple minutes if anybody wants to talk about. Looks like again the idea of shared open space is predominantly what's most important, and then the other 3 are all pretty neck and neck. So I think everybody kind of agrees. It seems like, again, based on this super scientific polling that we put out here, that the idea of smaller lot sizes and maybe shared open spaces is a good general concept of how to go for this. Anybody want to elaborate on why they might have would have picked one of the other ones? Or Kelly, if you want to share your super secret that we didn't put out here.
I think that view shed is a good second choice as part of conservation. The open space is number 1, but view sheds are important too.
Sure.
I agree view sheds are important, but I don't know that that has any relationship necessarily to the smaller lot size. I do think that we hear a lot from council people and from other folks that when we try to do some of these smaller lot PRD developments, that they get complaints about not having enough parking. But I didn't want to pick have adequate parking as the second choice because that has a lot more implications than the small reason that I might pick that. Because again, the whole impervious surface situation, but you also want to make sure people aren't, if you have narrower roads, people won't be able to park on the roads. So you got to have enough driveway space, etc., or some visitor parking. I think there's a way to do adequate parking without making it a much larger amount of impervious area. I think there's a way to do that sensitively. That's all I got to say.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, Mike, I back up Kelly on that. That I was one of the people that chose adequate parking because it, while we still are married to our cars now, and hopefully won't be forever, we do want to achieve with these developments potential for getting to a smaller street so that we don't encourage people just, we want to have the street widths wide enough for two lane traffic, but we don't want to have it like enough for a car to park and then not have an emergency vehicle be able to get past or something like that. So, we can cluster some, like visitor parkings and things like that, or have uh, something to allow for enough parking, because I think the only way we're going to get smaller lot sizes is to make sure that we still can accommodate some parking, but we also need to be able to pull everything in closer to the road. So we can, there's ways to get there. We just, and so I think by being able to do the other two categories benefit once we can, pull everything tighter and cluster them tighter. So anyway.
I'm gonna get specific on this one, like 30 feet. Do you think that's the kind of appropriate road width if we were to dictate that, or do you think more or less? And you don't have to answer that right now.
Well, I think, we could,
Please.
two people can adequately pass on an 18-foot road, and then, you may have, and then if you had a lot size, if you needed two cars, you could park them end to end, or if you had a garage and at least one parking space, then you could do that. Right now we're pushing driveway lengths to be, 25 feet from the back of the sidewalk to the front of the garage, and that's enough for two cars. We don't, we don't necessarily need to push the buildings that far behind the sidewalk, especially if we can pull the sidewalk in a little closer to the road. So I mean, we could do 22 feet, but if we get as far as pavement, and 20 I think is more adequate. So
Okay.
if you listen to Chief, 20 is the minimum, but we don't necessarily need to go there. 18 is the minimum.
And I agree with all of that. And I think that the planning design services and the land development code reform is all talking about lessened setbacks and things like that. And that's great. And I think we need to get there, but there are still these barriers. Like Kent said, now the 25-foot garage or driveway depth is actually in the code instead of just a policy. And that just blows up everything good we were trying to do with the shortened setbacks.
Right.
Well, if you have a two-car garage, you could have a two-car driveway, and you can have a much shorter distance between the sidewalk and the front of the garage. You wouldn't need 25 feet.
Tell that to Jeff Brown.
This is Juva again. Like this parking it's on the planning committee. We have discussed parking at great lengths. So I would say that parking is important. I didn't vote for any one of these. Again, I'm driving around, but I do think that parking is important and it's something that we can address. But my question would be, so would be the goal of this to mandate one-car driveways, or, because it's very popular right now for people to have parking ruin their driveway for all of their cars, which usually means a two-car driveway. I just was curious about how you are thinking, Mike, the implementation of that would look.
That's why we're asking the question. That's why we're having the conversation, because we kind of want to hear from you guys of what's important and what's needed for these design standards.
Well, I mean, I live in an old part of the city, and we do have a single car driveway, and a lot of people park their cars on the street, and it was very controversial in the neighborhood when the city came in and put signs up on the street that said you could only park on one side because the school bus couldn't get through. And I just would, whatever we do with parking, we should just be cautious. And I would be worried about a mandate in there. That's one of those things where I think we should try some things and allow for some flexibility in this when it comes to parking, rather than mandating it be just one thing.
No, that's kind of what I'm hearing too, is that there's maybe not a one size fits all approach to this. And something that we can get into the details a little bit more about as we continue through this process. I think we have 2 more questions and 9 minutes left, and hopefully we can have a few minutes at the end if anybody wants to share generally. So this one, I'll just give you kind of a quick minute about it. Again, kind of open-ended answer, but what are the positive outcomes of clustered residential development? So what are, kind of in a word or two, or a brief sentence, what are some positive outcomes from clustered style residential development? Hopefully that wasn't too tough of a question. I don't see the answers coming in yet, but probably start popping up any moment now. There they are. So I think this first one's been said a lot: reduced infrastructure costs, getting to know your neighbors, ability to preserve more open space, walkability. Second, lack of affordability, which is not positive. You're getting to my next question here. No, that's all right. Lessening our impact on natural resources, higher density, varied housing types, potentially more consistent open space, reduces impervious surface area per dwelling, more variety of dwelling types, reduces footprint, reducing environmental impact, reducing development costs, preservation, conservation of more land surface for the environmental benefit. So it sounds like kind of the recurring themes are there's the positive environmental benefit, but then there's also the ability for a variety of housing types are really good. I think the reduced infrastructure cost is a very valid point that's in there. I'll give you 30 seconds more. So if anybody wants to add anything else on here. And while I give that 30 seconds, if anybody wants to elaborate on my response, they're welcome to. All right, whoever said lack of affordability, which is not a positive, keep that in mind on your next slide. So education, going to the next one. All right, so what are the potential negative outcomes of clustered residential development? I've already got some answers that are in here pretty quick. Degradation of natural resources. So again, like if there are the negatives behind this idea of clustered development, what would that be? Containing developments from overwhelming natural buffers and protecting streams, roadway capacities as several clusters run together, lack of access to commercial uses without having to drive, overwhelming infrastructure. So it sounds like a lot of it's around the sort of roadway capacity. If you put these clusters in, then you almost have to drive to some of these places because you're not as spread out potentially, or you overwhelm the infrastructure because you've got people focused in one area. Parking challenges, again, kind of related to the traffic. So the traffic challenges on there. I'll give you another 45 seconds or so if anybody else wants to add anything to this. And if you don't have anything negative, then you don't have to respond to this one. Unbuffered impacts to view sites exceeding carrying capacity of waste and stormwater. Lack of affordability. You still have to make the numbers right. The land still has a price, and you have to charge more for a small lot than other areas of town would. If no sewer is available, if hot weather might encounter more violence. Lowered value for sellers is on there. So it seems like the sort of recurring themes on here are that one is the roadway capacity and the sort of issues with the infrastructure itself. Also, is there a market for this? And if there is, what's the affordability component to that market? And then the the drive down potential return to sellers as people are selling again. That kind of goes back to that market concept of how much of a market is there for that. Does anybody have anything they really want to elaborate on this one? All right, well, I believe that is the end of our questions. I said we'd be here till about 7:30, and we've got 4 minutes left. So again, that survey, we appreciate everybody dealing with sort of the confusion of some online survey. But we think it's an interesting way to sort of start some dialogue with folks when you can show those real-time results of what people are thinking. People that may not be comfortable speaking, they can still put a little bit of input into this. And then we can have those conversations around what people are thinking. Obviously, that it's not all inclusive of everything, but those are the things that, through our internal discussions, are most beneficial to us at this point as we start to think through what these draft regulations are. So, kind of next steps. I'll get through this, and then we can open up if anybody has any questions or anything. We're going to hopefully be able to take the feedback. We got some really good feedback. It's really good input tonight. But I'm also going to put this survey online and utilize that feedback as well. Anyone and everyone is welcome to take the survey. So please feel free to share it with as many people as you would like. But we're going to take the feedback we've got based off this survey, the conversations tonight, but additionally, this is the visioning meeting and any other conversations we've had, as well as kind of best practices that are out there, all these other opportunities. At a very minimum, our hope is to develop sort of an outline of sort of regulation strategies. But we will hope to share with you guys in the not too distant future. Our goal is to have, again, we'll probably do a public meeting first, followed by the working group. So our goal will be to have another public meeting probably in November or December to look over that outline, the sort of initial draft. We'll make sure that email everybody who's been involved in any way at this point of that meeting when it does come to fruition. And again, if you would like, please go to verificate.new forums, and the survey will be on there along with a lot of other materials and resources. So with that, I've tried to talk more than anybody, so apologies for that. Does anybody have any questions that we can cover kind of quickly? I will also say that if anybody wants us to come and kind of speak individually to the group or listen to the group or anything like that, we're happy to do that. Just let us know. We want to get as much input as possible. As I said, I know we've had a few conversations with a few folks already. That's been very insightful for us. So again, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Joe Haberman's kind of on the planning and design side. So there's our contact information. This presentation will be online, so you don't need to jot it down. You can just go to the website, @new forums. Anybody have any questions, anything like that before we adjourn for the evening?
I just want to say thank you, Mike, Rachel, and Joe, and anybody else who had any part of putting this together.
Thank you all very much for participating. It wouldn't have been fun without you.
Yeah, Mike, this is Barbara. I hope going forward we can have in-person meetings. This is very unsatisfactory, I'm sorry to say.
Barbara, unfortunately, I'm going to disagree with you because I was going to tell Mike that I appreciated this format and I thought it worked very well. So my apologies
Well,
to you,
that's
Barbara.
great. You were able to participate. I was not. And so
well,
it's not working.
We can take it under consideration for next time. It does allow us to, when we do it virtually, for us to facilitate the conversation a little bit more focused than if we had a sort of general meeting. It's also not easy to find a space, though. We don't have unlimited space or unlimited access to spaces, but we'll certainly take it into consideration. If we end up going online with the next one, we'd be happy to try and give like a quick tutorial. We could have a 15-minute meeting or something, whatever's convenient for anybody. We're happy to come out and show you how Menti and those kind of things work or how WebEx works, if that would be beneficial. So I understand your concerns, Barbara. Thank you for relaying them, and we'll definitely take that into consideration at the next meeting.
Yeah, Mike, this is Steve. I think as we get into the detail of the regulations, that an in-person meeting would be beneficial.
Imperative.
Yeah, Frank,
Again, we will certainly take, based on what we're able to come up with. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Mike, Jeff, Frank, I think as we to echo these concerns, as we get into the details and want to review in substance some of these proposals and hash out a way forward, I think in-person, face-to-face with a WebEx option for those that can attend, or shuttling kids or want to attend from their desk is fine. But I think these are too important to leave to this type of a format, and limits the input we're going to be getting. I know I've spoken to Councilman Benson's office, and I think there's some consensus to try to make this as inclusive as possible. I think the online form and input's a good thing. I thank you for that.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And again, and I'll reiterate this because I think it's really important. This working group and the people that are on this working group carries no more credence or authority or anything else than all the other public input we're getting. This is that opportunity where, as we kind of said from the beginning, we want some folks with some technical expertise or some representatives that are very intimate stakeholders to be able to have a little bit more dialogue. So we will certainly take it all into account going forward. The next public meeting that we do, which will be probably the next time we get together, will certainly be something that's in person. I personally, and it's probably a strong word, but loathe the hybrid approach. I think we'll have to collectively agree on one or the other. Because when you go hybrid, it gets really tough in terms of a lot of different components to that. So we will try to accommodate everybody as best we can, and keep the opportunities for input as open and robust as we can. And if you guys see more opportunity for us to be more inclusive, for people to participate, we are open to any ideas and suggestions. So we appreciate that.
Thanks, Mike, for doing all this. I appreciate it. So I could at least shuttle my kids tonight. I would love it if the meetings were during the day. I just had to get that in.
I'm all for that. If you guys are for that.
Here, here.
That's fine with me.
Mike, I'm for them being during the day. My wife was not pleased I was sitting through this thing tonight. So, but I thought the online format was fine. It was easy to get the questions out. That's for sure.
John, Jeff Frank, we agree. So,
well, the only drawback, Jeff, is I don't get to see you in person. I like to see you in person. That's the only.
You can turn your camera on, and I'm turning mine on to
got a way forward.
Yeah, I turned my camera on to show you all the smile I have for potentially doing this during hours, so I don't have my third night meeting in a row this week.
Then if we could, as a working group, this is Juva, I would move that we do that. I think it would take care of. I think a lot of us could be there, and it would take care of the technology issue and those kinds of things. So if we could meet during the day the next time, I think that would be great.
Because now I have to go taxi my kids. So
yeah,
during the day in person.
Here, here.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Thursday at 1 o'clock is a good day usually.
Yeah. Every other week.
Yeah.
Yep. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Now, we seriously, that's music to my ears. We do these because we want it to be as participatory as possible, and we try to accommodate. I know a lot of people have work schedules, but if this sort of working group is on agreement on that, we are more than okay with that approach. So as we get next to it, again, the next sort of component of, and we can have some email conversations and things like that beforehand. But the next get together will be a public meeting, so that will probably have to be in the evening because we want that to be open to a broader group of people. And the majority of people aren't necessarily professionals in this sort of realm, so it's harder for them to get away during the day. But with the working group, we can certainly do it during like hours.
Perfect. And we can share that link. That'll be online tomorrow. We can share that link with whomever we would like to. Is that right? For everybody to take that survey? Yes, ma'am. Yeah, we'll get, as soon as it gets up, I will email this entire group and let everyone know. Okay, awesome. Thanks so much, Mike, for everything tonight. All right, I kept you guys 5 minutes after. I appreciate you sticking around. Thanks for the input. It was really beneficial. We will talk to you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much.